Kickoff is 10 days away against LSU, and Florida State is just a couple of days away from releasing their depth chart for that game. But we've got good news for you today. We've spoken with some people. We've tried to confirm some things. We're going to take a few educated guesses, and we're going to tell you what the likely too deep is for Florida State when this depth chart comes out. Now, I know what you're thinking. This probably isn't going to be very exciting because Florida State brought back like 89% of their production. There's not a lot of surprises. There's nothing new on here. That's not the case. We will fly through and make this as quick as possible on the positions you already know about. But I do think there's a couple of positions where we'll take some time and we'll stop and we'll analyze, give you some injury updates, some news and notes there as well, and try and get you caught up on everything you need to know about what Florida State's depth chart will likely look like. Now, the one caveat to this is Mike Norvell loves using the or. And the guys that are there at practice, though they do a phenomenal job, they're not allowed to comment on the depth chart, who's not practicing, who's not been in, and who hasn't maybe made as big of an impact, because Norvell gives the access and asks in return that injuries and other things aren't discussed. We don't follow under those same rules. We don't have to follow that. We're not at practice. And so I can give you guys a little bit more insight with some respect to some of the program rules, but also just kind of being real with you guys and telling you what I know. So let's get after it. Quarterback is one that we won't spend a lot of time on. Everybody knows Jordan Travis is the starter. He's the guy that hopefully will be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And I'll say this, his backup in the LSU game, I expect to be Tate Rodemaker. But I put a little asterisk down there by Brock Glenn's name. I think he and Duffy are kind of at that same level right now. I would not be surprised if later on in the year, Brock Glenn had overtaken and was the backup to Jordan Travis. If he had overtaken Tate and was now up into that role. Can't say that for certain that happens, but that is the vibe that I'm getting. That's what I'm hearing from multiple places, that what Brock has done in camp has been very, very impressive. I don't know that he's ready just yet. If Jordan's helmet comes off, or if Jordan twists an ankle, or Jordan goes down, God forbid all of those things to happen. But if that happens, I would expect Tate to be your guy to go in. Running back hasn't changed from the spring. I still like Benson at 1, Toafili 2. I like Rodney Hill a ton at 3. And then I like Campbell and Holmes behind him. I love the depth in this room, but I think you have a pretty clear 1, 2, 3 with Benson, Toafili, and Hill. Benson didn't get a ton of burn in that LSU game. In fact, he came on a lot later in the year. All three of the top three, Ward, Benson, and Toafili, had 100-yard games against Duquesne, but then Benson was pretty quiet against LSU. With the loss of Mason Smith for the opener, I would very much anticipate Benson to have a big game, and I'm excited to see what both he, Toafili, and Hill do on the ground against LSU. Wide receiver is obviously a position that Florida State is ultra talented when it comes to this position. I expect your number one wide receivers to be Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. I'm not breaking any news there. I didn't list this out with Wilson or Coleman here. Those are your top dogs. I am hearing good things about Winston Wright in the slot. I think some of his scrimmage time has been really, really good. That's a spot that could ultimately go to him or Ja'Kai Douglas. I know that Ja'Kai got a little bit banged up, but I do think that they'll both be ready, and I like Winston Wright to start there. I think the next level after that Wilson-Coleman line is probably Destin Hill and Kentron Portier. I like Kentron a lot. There was some news about him getting banged up. I believe that he is good to go. He has been out at practice. I think that what Destin Hill brings from an athleticism and talent ability puts him up to the top of that next kind of rung of wide receivers. I like Deuce Spann and Hakeem Williams behind them. And then whoever doesn't start in the slot will fill that other spot. I'm projecting Winston Wright to be your starter in the slot. Would not shock me at all if Ja'Kai Douglas is there. I think that starters at wide receiver are probably less important than anywhere else on the field. Norvell is going to roll with a lot of matchups and what he likes against different defenses. I think that is going to be a big impact of who gets on the field the most, right? You're always going to like what you got with Wilson and Coleman, but who gets on the field at other places? Well, depends on what you want to do, how big you want to go, how fast you want to go. So wide receiver, who starts, where they are in the depth chart, to me doesn't matter. Norvell just has a ton of options here, and he can utilize any and all of them. Tight end is one that we've moved some things around. I really love this trio here. I think that people forget about Biscuit. You have Bell, who I do think is going to be your number one, and you have Morlock, who I think is very, very good. I think it's going to take Morlock a little time to acclimate, get into the system, but I think people forget about Biscuit. They forget about Douglas. I think that Marquise is going to have a very good year. The highlight came out of him making a spectacular catch at practice or scrimmage here recently from the football account. I really love this group. I think that they provide another layer, another dimension to this offense that is going to make it truly, truly unguardable. I like Bell getting the most reps here, but again, I think it's about matchups. I think it's about what Norvell likes to do at any given time. I think that if there's ever a time that he wants to get real crazy and go with Johnny Wilson, Kyle Morlock, Jaheim Bell, and Keon Coleman all on the field at the same time, maybe throw Destin Hill out there. You imagine that 5 wide? Pretty ridiculous stuff. Offensive line is probably one that people want to know about the most, and it's one that I'm going to cheat and use a Norvellism and use an or in there. I think some version of the 6 names on the field will be your starters week 1 against LSU. And I know that's cheating, but Norvell gets to do it, so I'm going to do it too. I've been told that if Robert Scott is 100% healthy and ready to go, which I believe that he will be, he is going to start a tackle. That would have me with Bless Harris starting at the other tackle, and I'd have those 2 positions solid and locked in. I cannot see a situation where Jeremiah Byers does not start for you. If Scott's injured, I could see him filling in at that left tackle spot. If Scott's ready to go, I think Byers is going to play one of your guard spots, or maybe that right tackle spot, and you move Harris in. But I've heard really good things about Bless, and I don't see him overtaking him for that role. I think Byers takes one of your guard spots, and then it becomes 3 guys for 2 positions: Smith, Roddick, and Emmanuel. Smith just doesn't seem to get beat out for that center position, and so I almost want to bet on him and then say it's between Roddick and Emmanuel there at right guard, but Big Meech was so good for you last year in the run game that I could certainly see him getting that role and Roddick sliding in at the center, or Smith being the center and Emmanuel there at right guard and Roddick coming off the bench. But the problem here is probably the best problem that Florida State could have. They've got too many good and capable offensive linemen, and these are just maybe your top 6. They've got other guys that they're very confident in as well. We didn't mention Washington. We didn't mention the Auburn transfer, Keandre Jones, some of your young guys that are there. I think Florida State's got a really good problem on their hands at offensive line, and I expect them to rotate a little bit, but if I had to project starters, it would look something like this. Before we get to defensive line, let me give a quick shout out to Garnet and Gold. Listen, if you're an FSU fan, you need to be shopping at garnetandgold.com. You're this far into this video, you're 10 minutes in, you are an absolute FSU maniac. You need to be shopping nowhere else. Listen, they were the first ones to come out with the jerseys. They've got the shoes from Nike this year. They've got the Columbia swag, the Nike coaches polos, whatever. I just bought a bunch of stuff for my kids and my wife. Make sure that you're shopping at garnetandgold.com. Let me save you 15% by using No Slaw at checkout. Listen, if you're in the state of Florida, you probably have a little bit of time, but if you're not in the state of Florida, you need to get your order in right now if you want it by the LSU game. After this video, go to garnetandgold.com, get your order in, use No Slaw for 15% off. They will take care of you there. All right, back to the depth chart. Let's look at defensive line. We'll start at the edge positions. Again, this is really easy. I'm not breaking any news here, so we'll move through it quickly. I expect Jared Verse and Pat Payton to be your starters. I think Gilbert Edmond has done some really, really good things and improved in the summer and here in the fall. He's definitely closer to the player they thought they were getting from South Carolina earlier in the process. I think they're really excited about him being able to be a depth piece, being able to come in on that second string. And then Byron Turner has had a really good fall camp. I expect him to get a lot of burn as well. That would be my top 4 as far as edge goes. First and second string, that's my 2 deep at edge. Defensive tackle, this is the interesting one. Fabo, I'm told, should be ready to go for LSU. Now, does he start? I would like to think that if he's ready, he starts the game. I think that's kind of more of an honor thing, more of a captain, more of a respect thing. You let Fabo start that game. Is Fabo going to be ready to go for 80 plays against LSU? Probably not. I wouldn't think that his conditioning is there. He hasn't been a participant in fall camp, so I just don't think he'd be ready. Now, does he play a considerable amount? I would think so. I don't think they're bringing him out there to play 10 plays or 15 plays or 20 plays. I think that Fabo and Farmer and Fisk will rotate quite a bit, no matter really who the starting two are. Unless Fabo has a setback, I expect all three of them to play and play at a very high level. I've heard great things about both Farmer and Fisk in fall camp, and if Fabo wasn't ready, I would be very, very confident in Farmer and Fisk. No doubt about it, I'd feel really good about where we were. I would not feel as good on a depth perspective. That's why I think Fabo is so important. And not that Fabo is depth, but he just increases your depth. If Fabo's your one, having Farmer as 3 or Fisk at 3 really helps raise the floor of your room tremendously. Jackson's there at 4. Obviously, massive asterisk by that one. It almost seems like you're going to need the governor to have a stay of execution at this point. I'm not super confident. I know others have put out some confidence, some hints that they think something could be done on this. That's not something that's been expressed to me at all. Love to be wrong there. Love to raise my hand and say like, hey, you blew it, you big idiot. I'm not very confident that anything happens over the next 10 days. Love to be wrong. Love for this to get Old Taste exposed. Please let that happen to me. I think A.O. Briggs, you've got other guys behind him that kind of fill out the rest of that rotation. But I would love to have Jackson back because I do think he's your solid number 4 in that rotation. Not to discredit anybody else or slight anybody else. I just think he's the most ready right now. Sonone has mentioned this at Noles 247 that he kind of does some things every once in a while that just kind of make you scratch your head and say, dang it, man, I really wish he was playing. Jackson being out there would be huge for the Noles. Linebacker is a really easy position. This one hasn't really moved a ton. Kalen, Tatum, DJ, your starters. I think Omar Graham, Cryer from Northwestern probably back them up. And then you've got Blake Nicholson. I've got Ward there. A little bit of an asterisk there. Won't go into how serious or anything like that, but I think he's a little banged up right now. Don't know that he's going to be ready for this game. If I'm a little wrong on that or if he is able to make it back, we'll adjust, but I have him there kind of at your 3rd level, but I don't know that he's going to be ready for this one. Again, that's pretty far down on the depth chart. I don't know how much Florida State was going to be counting on DeMarco Ward to make a massive impact in year 1. We'll see if he's able to make it back and when he's able to make it back, but just the same as Nicholson, I don't know that I expect Blake to come in and have a huge amount of playing time or anything early, especially not in this LSU game, not in the Clemson games, maybe later toward the year. We'll see those guys more, but it's an asterisk, but I don't really know how much he was going to make a massive impact anyway in this opening game. We move out to the secondary, and we're wrapping up here. I appreciate you guys watching. If you've watched this far and you're not subscribed, I really don't know what you're doing. Make sure you hit that button. But we've had a little bit of a change here. I had Jones and Green at the top when I did this originally. I think Fentrell Cypress is going to end up starting. I heard that Jarian Jones had his arm in a cast, had a glove over that, just kind of some protection there. Need to kind of see how that works out. If that is hindering or limiting at all, I'm kind of using that to project Cypress up to my starting cornerback 1 and Renardo Green at the other position. I think the second level would look like Jones and Thomas if that's the case, but don't be super surprised if this gets changed out and you see Jones and Green start and Cypress coming off the bench, but still getting a ton of reps. Florida State likes to go into that 5 or 6 DB set a lot. It's a passing team that you're going to see in LSU. Don't be surprised to see lots of these guys out there mixing it up all the time. I like Vance in the nickel. I've been hearing he's been doing some pretty special things out at camp. I think that he'll continue to play and thrive in that role. When we look at the back end, Florida State has improved here at the safety position. We've gotten a little bit deeper. We've taken a couple of true freshmen off of the board. We'll talk about some of those guys in just a moment, but you know what you've got in Denton Brown at the back end. Brown, obviously the hero of the game last year, walking it off with the point after touchdown block. I really want to see Dent take a massive step forward this year, and I love Brown's athleticism. I'm really, really excited to see what he can bring. I like Barker a ton. I think he and Noles kind of fit in as your next level of safety guys. You've moved Noles back from cornerback. Barker looks to have been a hit in the transfer portal. The JUCO product has done a really good job in fall camp, and that takes us to our really young guys, your safeties that we didn't mention. Hussey, Edwin Joseph, a defensive back, Quindarius Jones, a defensive back. I think Kenton Kirkland is another guy who Florida State loves what they have in those young guys. I don't know that they're ready just yet against LSU. I'm not saying that none of them make it in, none of them make an impact, but I do think that Florida State loves what they have for the future. I just think that at the moment, I don't know that they're ready after being on campus for some of them a few months, some of them 7, 8 months, are ready for this game right now. I think long-term Florida State's got some ballers there in the secondary. We move on to the specialists, and I've kind of moved a couple of things around here. I'm still cheating at kicker. I think it's Fitzgerald or Keltner, but it seems like nobody's really separated. Both of them have been pretty good. If I had to give an edge, I'd probably just say they stick with Fitzgerald because he's the one that's been there and been in that moment, and they'd probably stick with him. If Keltner doesn't take off and really far exceed where Fitzgerald is, I would expect Ryan to get the starting nod there. I still put the or. I still cheated like Mike Norvell is going to do on Monday, but I like Fitzgerald to probably edge him out unless something big changes. You know, Alex is your punter. And then at kick return, I think Trey Benson's still kind of your main guy there. He was obviously phenomenal for you last year in that role. Don't be surprised to see some other guys in there mixing it up. I'd love to see Destin Hill back there taking the first one back to the house in Orlando, but we'll see. Punt returner, we've heard the reports. Keon Coleman catching punts back there. That's who I would probably project. I think his sure hands and his electric playmaking abilities make him an ideal target, an ideal candidate for that role. I do understand that people don't like your very best athletes back there because what if they get hurt, or what if this happens, or what if that happens? That's not something that I have in my mind. I remember when Peter Warwick and Percy Harvin and those guys used to return kicks. Bring that back. I'm all for it. Now, do I want guys getting injured? Absolutely not, but this is football. You play to win. Peter Warwick took a lot more kicks back for touchdowns than he ever got hurt returning any kind of kick. So get after it and let's go. All right, this is where we're at on our depth chart. We've got 10 days until kickoff. The official depth chart will probably come out on Monday or Tuesday from Mike Norvell. There'll be a lot of oars on there. We will do another video just like this telling you what lines to read between when that depth chart comes out. What certain oars mean, what certain lists mean, how Mike Norvell's disguising certain things on the depth chart. We will break it all down. So make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure you're part of our Patreon so that you don't miss any of the inside info that we're sharing there. Again, if you've watched this video for nearly 20 minutes now and you're not in our Patreon getting that news and info every single day, multiple times a day, you need to be in there. It's free to get in the Patreon. It's $3 for the exclusive channels, but come join us. I'll link it down in the description. Join us there so you're not missing out. Appreciate you guys for watching. If you missed this morning's massive news that a huge part of LSU's defensive line is going to miss that opening game in Orlando, you can click right here to get caught up on it.